Underrated. A term to use for someone or something who isn't highly valued enough. The term is used a lot. You can use this term for just about anything, but in this case, we'll be talking about the most underrated teams. Now, whether it be expectations, social media exposure, or just flat out the team itself, these are my 3 most underrated teams going into next season. Now, for this list, I'll be using this criteria. And as I mentioned earlier, this will be based off of expectation, social media exposure, and the team itself. And I think these teams can make some big noise going into next season, and I'm here to talk about it. Now, if you're a returning viewer who hasn't subscribed yet, make sure you do so. 95% of my viewers are not subscribed. So if you haven't done so yet, make sure you do it, as it helps the channel out a ton. Now, without further ado, let's get into the 3 most underrated teams going into next season. Now, the first team we'll be talking about today is the Orlando Magic. This may be a surprise to some, but I feel as though they'll take that next leap and maybe sneak into the play-in tournament. I mean, just looking at the Magic's roster alone, there are a lot of bright spots. In the backcourt, you have Cole Anthony, who I'm really high on. He just came off of averaging 16, 5, and 5 on not so great efficiency, but I feel as though he'll clean that up next season. He's got the athleticism, the shooting, the handle, and the playmaking ability. I just think that it's time to put it all together. And he's gotten better since his first year in the league, so I think he'll continue that trend. And then next you have Jalen Suggs, who I'm also very high on, and I also feel as though if he gets a more prominent role in this offense, then I feel as though he can flourish. I mean, in his first season, he averaged 12 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, and a steal off the bench. And with him being so young and getting the green light in his offense, I feel as though he'll only get better. He's a great perimeter defender and high IQ player, which I feel as though is what this team needs. And moving on to the front court, this team is loaded with young wings. Franz Wagner, who was one of the best rookies in the league last year, is another young player on this team that I'm really high on. I think that he has the perfect skill set for today's NBA. He's a 6'9" guy who can shoot and put the ball on the floor. He's also a really good finisher as well. He's another young guy on this team who will continue to get better and has a very unique skill set. The next guy on this team that was a really good player for them last season would be Wendell Carter Jr. Wendell Carter Jr. last season was averaging 15 points and 10 rebounds and was one of the better defenders on this team. That's another young guy that I'm really high on. And the next guy that I wanted to talk about that I feel as though will be the piece that unlocks this team next season would be Jonathan Isaac. If Jonathan Isaac could come back from injury and play like his old self and be the unicorn on defense that he is, then I feel as though that will add another dynamic to this team. And then finally, you've got the #1 pick in Paolo Banchero, who before he got shut down by his coach was battling with Keegan Murray to see who the best rookie was. If Paolo Banchero can come in and make an immediate impact, then I feel as though that's what will push this team into playoff contention. Because if he comes in and averages 20 points a game, then that gives them the #1 option that they desperately needed. I mean, I feel as though the only thing holding this team back is the first option. I mean, to be a competitive team in the East, you need a #1 guy that you can put your trust in to get you buckets. And I think that Paolo Banchero has the skill set to be that guy. So to end it off, I feel as though the Magic are a team that everyone should be on the lookout for. And that's the first underrated team of the video. Now, the second team I wanted to talk about would be the Denver Nuggets. I mean, yeah, they made the playoffs last season, but I feel as though the reason they are underrated is because I don't hear people talking about them amongst the best teams in the league. I mean, when you hear people talk about the best teams in the league, you always hear teams like the Clippers, the Warriors, the Sixers, Celtics, and Bucks, but you never hear the Nuggets. I mean, the Nuggets have one of the best starting lineups in the league, and they also have one of the deepest benches in the league as well. I mean, just going down the roster, you have a guy in Nikola Jokic, who was the MVP last season and is one of the best players in the league. And then you've got guys like Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. who will be returning to the team next season. And then you've got a guy in Aaron Gordon who was one of the better defenders on this team and is a very valuable piece for them. And then off the bench, you got guys like Bones Highland and DeMarcus Cousins who can score the ball. And then you got 2 3-and-D guys in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown. I am very high on this team because of the star power in the bench. Now, for this to be one of the top teams in the league, they do need Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. to come back healthy and play like how they did before the injury. And I feel as though they will. I mean, neither of their games are predicated on athleticism. They're both snipers who don't need to rely on their athleticism to be effective on offense. And I know it will take time for them to get back to their old selves, but eventually, like I said, I do believe they'll get back to that level. And looking at this team from a standings perspective, I feel as though this team will finish very high. I mean, other than the Warriors, I don't think there's a team in the West that's better than them. From top to bottom, this is one of the most complete teams in the West. I mean, just think about this for a second. This team finished as the 6th seed and was only 1 game back from the 5th seed while missing their 2 best players. So just imagine what they'll do next season after they add 2 of their best players on the team and then add 2 more guys who give them something that they lacked before. That would be scary for the rest of the Western Conference. So the Nuggets are my second most underrated team going into next season. And my third team that I wanted to talk about will be the Portland Trail Blazers. This is a very talented team that has some very sneaky pickups this offseason, and I feel as though they don't get talked about enough. I mean, when you talk about a team that could surprise a lot of people next year and make a lot of noise in the Western Conference, this is definitely that team. I mean, just going down the roster, you obviously have Damian Lillard, who will be returning from injury next season. I feel as though Dame will come back next season and continue to play at a high level. I mean, I feel as though if you have Damian Lillard on your team, then at the bare minimum, you're a high play-in team. And then this team has another guy in Anthony Simons, who I feel as though will take that next leap next season. I mean, just last season, Anthony Simons was averaging 17 points and was one of the only bright spots on that Portland team. I believe those numbers will definitely go up this season. I mean, playing alongside Damian Lillard will only make his game better, and I feel as though his playstyle is perfect next to Damian Lillard. He's a 6'3" point guard that can play on or off the ball. He can score on all 3 levels. He's ultra athletic, and he's an underrated playmaker. So those 2 guys right there, that's already one of the better backcourts in the league. And then moving on, you've got a guy in Jeremy Grant who's always a great wing to have on your team. Just last season, he was averaging 19 points on a horrible Detroit team. So that's a guy who can come in and give them another scorer. And then you've got Yusuf Nurkic, who's been on this team for a long time and is always a good serviceable big to have. Just last season, he averaged 15 points and 11 rebounds, so he's another threat. And then they've got Josh Hart, who I'm very high on and has developed very well. Last season with Portland, he was averaging 20 points a game, so that's another threat that they have on this team. And then this team had 2 very underrated pickups in Gary Payton and Joe Ingles. Gary Payton is obviously one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and this team definitely needs that. And Joe Ingles is a guy who can space the floor out and be a very valuable piece for this team. So this team has some very talented players. And this team finished 3 games out of the play-in tournament, and that was without Damian Lillard. So if you add Damian Lillard to that team, then that obviously makes them a lot better. And I feel as though that will propel them into the play-in tournament. So the Trailblazers are definitely a team that should be talked about more. And to end this video off, those are my 3 most underrated teams going into next season. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any video ideas for me, make sure to leave it down below in the comment section. All of my social media links will be down below in the description. And of course, there will be more videos just like this on the way soon. And as always, I'm out. Peace.